Welcome everyone to this another episode of Unlearning the Falsehoods. I guess we have discussed a lot of things, a lot of myths have been busted. Um, to some of the viewers, all this information might seem a little bit far fetched. They would think that I'm bluffing or I am cooking up stories out of the blue. For those of you who wish an access to all the sources that are being discussed in this series, uh, this is the book that I am referring to. You can refer to this book. It is written by J. Deepak. Very thankful and grateful to him that he has done this a humongous service to the pagans of this subcontinent, because if it wasn't for him, these sources wouldn't come to the mainstream. At least now, at least people are talking about these things. Earlier, it was just our history textbooks that we had to refer, and yeah. So largely, all our history textbooks, any majority of the history sources are leaning towards the left, towards the Marxist, and this very idea that the political leanings or the political ideologies should be bifurcated into the left or the right, in itself is a entrenchment of colonial ideas, colonial thought, and colonial lens. Okay, you're not supposed to view things through the lens of either it is a left or either it is a right. Okay, there are only two sides that we have in Bharat. Number one is either you are a national. Okay, all your actions must align for the betterment of Rashtra, that is Dharma. Or you are anti-national. You are supporting ideologies that do not originate and are not organic to this land. And that is the distinction. All right. So if you don't know what is left, what is right, why do we call it left? Why do we call it right? Okay, I urge you to do your own due diligence and appeal to your own sense of reason about why is it called left, why is it called right, and then compare it and cross-reference it with our history, ancient history. Were there any in the kingdoms, okay, in the court of a king, were there people who used to advocate the left ideology, and were there people who advocated the right ideology? Okay, and you will inevitably arrive at the conclusion that there are only two sides: either you are a national or you're an anti-national. End of debate. All right, so right now, in our previous episode we had established that Mohandas Gandhi, he was running a one-man show of the Congress due to the power vacuum that was created after the fragmentation of moderates. Okay, moderates, they themselves formed a separate group, so they were out from Congress. The nationalists, after the passing away of Tilak, they had lost their momentum, so they were out of the question. So there was a big power vacuum at the core of Congress, and Gandhi takes up that opportunity. Being a political opportunist that he is, and I'm not blaming him for that. Okay, a lot of people will criticize me that how can you say that about Gandhi. So I do not mean it in a bad way. Okay, so if you are going to emulate, and if you're going to emulate Gandhi, at least do it in a correct way. Okay, he was a shrewd politician, a strict opportunist, at heart, and that is something that should be admired. Yes, so if you are looking for a future, or if you aspire to be a future politician, then you should definitely idolize Gandhi as a politician, not as a freedom fighter, not as a revolutionary, and totally not and absolutely not as a national leader. Having said that, let us focus on the controversial years. Okay, from 1921 to 1925. Okay, these were the years when Gandhi had just arrived to the scene of the Congress. He was running a one-man show, and let's see how things were progressing. Was it going well? Was it going smoothly? Because up until now, what had Gandhi done was he had arrived at the scene. He had advocated the unity with, a unity between the pagans and the Muslims. He had merged both the movements, that is the Khilafat and the non-cooperation movement, at like very less gains. Okay, if you are getting into this alliance, if you are getting into this treaty, that's effectively was non-cooperation and Khilafat was. It was a alliance of mutual benefit. Okay, but the benefits that the Muslim League stood to gain out of this alliance were far, far greater than what Gandhi had accepted in return. Okay, so what Gandhi had accepted in return was political traction within the Muslim community. Okay, he was of the opinion that if he could win over them through love and through compassion, because he somehow believed, that there is still some unity in the society. So had there been had there been the a unity in the society, we would have seen real life manifestations of it, which we clearly don't see even to this day. Okay, but let's keep our discussion limited to what Gandhi did. Okay, so now that he was running the show, he had merged both these movements, Khilafat and non-cooperation. So like everything else, you need artha, meaning you need finance to succeed at any given thing, not just a movement. So now, how do we take care of the finance? So they set up a fund that goes by the name of Tilak Memorial Swarajya Fund. It was named after Bal Gangadhar Tilak, the nationalist ideologue. So it was set up in January 1921. Okay, so funds were collected. All right. Now, what was happening was, all right, non-cooperation wasn't yielding any tangible results. Okay, if it indeed were yielding results, we would have seen, its documentation, because the historians, especially the leftist historians, they'll not miss a single opportunity to show what Gandhian actions had accomplished. Okay, if indeed it did anything tangible, it would have mentioned in our history textbooks, which is clearly not. Apart from just furthering his own political image, gaining public sympathy, I don't think Gandhi achieved anything else through non-cooperation. All right, so yeah. Now, what was happening was, it was Gandhi who was calling the shots of Khilafat movement as well. That is something that was not taken lightly by the Muslim leadership of Muslim League and the ulema, because they were under the impression that a non-Muslim cannot justly claim right over leading the Muslims. That was the whole point. That was the plank on which they were fighting for the two-nation theory, because a pagan justly cannot claim to rule over them simply because it is not Sharia compliant. All right, so that was something that was the dissatisfaction that the Muslims had with the Gandhi leadership. But nonetheless, why exactly were they sticking by it? Because they were gaining something out of that alliance, that is the Congress support, the legitimacy, the support from the Congress, and hence they were sticking to it, that is the Muslim League. Now there is this leader, Maulana Muhammad Ali, okay, and there is a place called Erode in Madras. So he makes a speech at this place on 2nd April 1921, okay, therein where he refers that he supports, that he supports the Afghans, he will support the Afghans if they invaded Bharat. Okay, why did he feel the need to speak such a thing? This is very well recorded in this book, or even on the internet you can find it. So this particular leader, Maulana Muhammad Ali, he makes this speech at Erode in Madras on 2nd April 1921, wherein he says that he clearly and he supports his Afghan brethren if they were to descend from their mountains and take over Bharat. So why did he feel the need to say this? Okay, one of the reasons could be, these are again speculations on my side, but this is an appeal to your reason. If they make sense to you, do your own due diligence. This is why he said what he said, because the Muslim leadership largely, they were dissatisfied with the leadership of Gandhi because it wasn't yielding anything. His principles of non-violence were amounting to nothing. Okay, and here he's simply talking about his side, that is his community, not the pagan side. Okay, the pagans, they were and they still are, divorced from the political narrative, because we are told that politics is a dirty business and it is a divide and rule and is hate politics and all, you should not take interest in it, whereas the other side is clearly politically conscious even in 1920s. So imagine 100 years, a century later in 2020, and 4 years later in 2024. Okay, that interest, that political consciousness and that political interest might have compounded. Okay, so clearly one side is being politically conscious, politically active, whereas the other pagan side is told that no, 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 you're supposed to stay away from politics, nothing could be done about it, let the elders take care of it. That was the stand a century ago, that is still the stand today as well. And hence I urge most of the people, especially the Gen Z, okay, take active interest in politics. And you don't need to read ancient, medieval and the contemporary ancient and medieval history for this. Simply just start studying the history of Bharat from 1947 onwards, and you'll see what exactly happened and where things are going. Because quite frankly, things haven't changed. They're still the same. The principles on which politics was fought in 1930s is still the same. All right. So yeah, and this Maulana Muhammad Ali, he makes that speech. Okay. Now this is what when he was arrested. Okay, this fellow, when he made that speech in Madras Presidency in Erode, he was arrested. That how can you make such a speech? Okay. After being arrested, he was presented in the front of a magistrate in Karachi, and this is what he had to say. Okay, these are his words. I must either be a sinner or a criminal. Okay, either I can sin or I can do a crime. Islam recognizes one sovereignty alone, the sovereignty of God, which is supreme and unconditional, indivisible and inalienable. The only allegiance Muslim, whether civilian or soldier, whether living under a Muslim or under a non-Muslim administration, is commanded by the Quran to acknowledge is his allegiance to God, to his Prophet, and to those in authority from among the Muslim chief, among the last mentioned being, of course, the Prophet's successor and commander of the faithful. This doctrine of unity is not a mathematical formula elaborated by abstruse thinkers, but a workaday belief of every Muslim, learned or unlettered. Okay, here is saying that the only rules by which I am bound, okay, are not the constitutional rules that the British were asking him to follow, not the law of the land, the pagan law of the land on which he resides, okay, but he is only bound by the laws that were written in their holy book, far away from the Bharatiya subcontinent, far away from the pagan culture. So he is only bound by those rules. So how do you convince an individual to believe in this thing? That he is only bound by the rules that were framed thousands of kilometers away from a land on which he was born. And he's saying this, okay? So he'd rather prefer to be a criminal than a sinner. Okay, he goes on further to say this, but the unalterable rule is and has always been that as Muslims they can obey only such laws and order issued by their secular rulers as do not involve disobedience to the commandments of God, who in the expressive language of the Holy Quran is the all-ruling ruler. These very clear and rigidly definite limits of obedience are not laid down with regard to the authority of non-Muslim administration only. On the contrary, they are of universal application and can neither be enlarged nor reduced in any case. Okay, so justification that he is providing for having made such a speech is that he has not broken any law. Then you'll ask, okay, haven't you broken this law that the British, government has formulated? No. He's saying that for us there is only one law that is written in their holy book, and that holy book was written thousands of kilometers away. So that is that person saying in 1921, these are not my words. All right. So this clearly highlights the two-nation theory at play here. And this is not something that has come out of the blue. Okay. In 1921, it was not that RSS or Jan Sangh was present and they were preaching politics of hate. This is in 1921. This is Dehlavi, Barelvi, Deobandi, Wahhabi, and all the ideologies at play over here, and this is centuries of indoctrination speaking. This is not out of the blue that this person has managed to cultivate these ideas and sentiments inside his head. Okay, this is centuries of work at play. So, inevitably, the magistrate of Karachi, in front of whom he had given this statement, passes him on as an accused and gives him 2 years of rigorous imprisonment. All right. Yeah. So this is what happens. In the meanwhile, in 1921, there was something called as Mopla genocide. Books refer to that as rebellion. Okay. Other books who claim to be from the Indic or civilizational wing refers to them as Mopla riots, but I would go a step further and name them as Mopla genocide. Okay, because there were clear instructions given to the people belonging to a certain community to kill and slaughter the pagans who lived in that particular area, rape their women, that we are going to cover exclusively in a separate video altogether. But right now, for your reference, such events had occurred in 1921. In 1921, there was no Jansang, there was no politics of hate being done. And why exactly were these things happening? Wasn't there a Ganga Jamni Tehzeeb? Wasn't there a secular spirit? These are some questions that I'm raising. Okay, if these are uncomfortable questions for you, then I guess history is not a topic that you should study. Okay, if you are so sentimental and emotional about things that have happened in the past, I would say don't study this. Live under a rock. Live out your life. Most probably there is some scope out there for you. But if you are indeed interested in the history, study with an open mind, study with a strong heart, study with stoicism. Okay, these things have to be faced. You cannot just simply put them under the blanket conveniently and say, oh, these things had happened, but let's not talk about it. I know I'm going to talk about them. Okay. So yeah, in 1921, there is a place called, that we like to call as the Malabar Coast in the state of Kerala. So there were some riots over there. Okay, on a large scale, the pagans, they were slaughtered, they were killed, their women were raped. There were people who were forcefully converted. Okay, in 1921, and here is why we are talking about it. Okay, we are going to look at how the Muslim League defends them. Okay, simply passes them off as something that is an isolated incident and should not be looked into it through a lens. It should not be looked into because it's an isolated incident. It's all political. And the reason why I'm bringing this out is you'll see that up to this current day, similar justifications are given for such incidents that happen. Look at what happened in Sandesh Khali in West Bengal. Look at what is currently happening in Bangladesh. I don't need to speak about these things. If you are politically active, not exactly politically active, if you are active on social media, you should, you must have looked, you must have come across these things. And if you still are not convinced, if you still are convinced that these things are only political and these are isolated incidents, then I would say, yeah, let's leave it at that. Let's not get into it. But yes, now what had happened was it had awakened the conscience of some of the moderates as well in the Congress. Up until now, they were under the impression that nothing is happening. Okay, all these things are simply just political things, and they should not be given too much attention, not at least more than what they deserve. This woke up certain sentiments from the Congress's side, and now that they had woken up to it, they were clearly able to see how exactly was the Muslim League and other political organization that had come up, to represent the political interests of the Muslims, how exactly were they defending their brethren. Okay, instead of condemning certain issues, they were looking for justifications as to how to absolve them of blame. Okay. And this is not me saying, I'm going to read out the statements that the leaders have made, and those things exist in public domain. And you will see, a similarity. This is what happens to this day as well. If there is somebody who is involved in a heinous crime against the pagans, okay, the leaders of the so-called moderate Muslim parties and other secular parties that we have these days, they will give intellectual justification, or rather they will this assume this garb of stubbornness to accept the reality. Okay, so I'm going to read a statement. This is Maulana Azad, who was the president of Jamaat-e-Ulema-e-Hind. That is a political organization. They held their session in Lahore in 1921. So this is their official stand against the Mopla genocide of the pagans. This conference of Jamiyat does not make bold to confirm the rumors published in the papers about the Moplas that they have harassed their Hindu neighbors and have forcefully converted some Hindus to Islam, unless they are verified by trustworthy sources, and declares that if these rumors are proved true, the conduct of the Moplas is against Islamic teachings and therefore condemnable. Okay, so this is a denial of convenience. Okay, you'll find similar statements being made by the so-called moderate Muslim parties. According to me, there are no moderate Muslim leaders out there in political arena of Bharat. There is no political party, that is Muslim, but advocate moderate or moderate stance or advocate the philosophy of liberalism. A Muslim political party, by its very nature, is radical. Okay, I know it's a politically incorrect statement, but somebody has to say this. Okay, so yeah, this is the stand by Jamaat-e-Ulema-e-Hind in the year of 1921. All they are saying is, we'll not trust the rumors. Okay, these are all rumors, unless and until a trustworthy organization investigates and brings out a fact. Then and only then we will condemn it. So they are not even outrightly condemning it. It is a conditional statement. Now, who will be these trustworthy organizations? Only the organizations that they think are trustworthy. The Supreme Court, the police, all these organizations are not trustworthy according to them. So this is, Maulana Azad making a statement in Lahore of the Mopla genocide. And you will find that similar statements to this very day are made. Anything that happens to the pagans has to be, blamed on the politics. Conveniently blamed on the politics. Okay. Now, what was happening? All these things were coming out to the fore. All this information was coming out. Now, this was creating some rift. Okay, I would not exactly call it a rift. You can only have a rift when both the sides are equally invested into that alliance. Clearly, the Muslim League was there because it was their interest that was getting furtherment. Whereas Congress was there in it wholeheartedly. They actually believed that supporting them on the Khilafat issue will win them over to their side. That was the actual belief. You can refer to the previous episodes in this series. I have read out a few statements of the people in the Congress, made by the pagans, and they were actually under this assumption that if you keep appeasing and wholeheartedly support this Khilafat cause of Turkey, the Muslim League will support them. But as we are going to see, okay, they were simply just using the moderates. They were simply just using Gandhi to punish the British. Because they had realized, okay, after the First World War, the Christians had taken over Turkey, the Ottoman seat, the Caliphate, the seat of the Ottoman Caliphate, and they could not think about this idea of passing away these places of worship of the Muslims on the hands of Christians. So now that they needed some leverage over the British, they went to the sides of the moderates with a conditional alliance. Meaning that only if you support Khilafat movement, then and only then we will support non-cooperation. And why did Gandhi agree to it? Because he was gaining his political traction. He was on the rise, a politician on the rise, and he needed the support. To this very day, you'll see that many of the aspiring politicians that we have today will inevitably follow this Gandhian practice of appeasement to further their own political image. Okay, and there is only one community that is appeased, other communities are not appeased. All right, now here is, okay, this is a statement from Maulana Hazrat Mohani. Okay, a Muslim League session was held on 30th of December 1921. Okay, 30th of December 1921. This is Maulana Hazrat Mohani. He was the president of this Muslim League session, and this is the justification he is giving for the Mopla genocide. Okay, he's not condemning it. He's not urging the government to work for the welfare of the people who are affected. He is justifying it. Okay, these are his words, not mine. You are probably aware that the Hindu India has an open and direct complaint against the Moplas and an indirect complaint against all of us that the Moplas are plundering and spoiling their innocent Hindu neighbors. But possibly you are not aware that the Moplas justify their action on the ground that at such a critical juncture, when they are engaged in a war against the English, their neighbors not only do not help them or observe neutrality, but aid and assist the English in every possible way. So here, this individual who goes by the name of Mohani, okay, Maulana Hazrat Mohani, he thinks, okay, the Moplas, some of them were converted, okay. So the neighbors, the pagan neighbors of the Moplas, they were working at the behest of the British and they were helping the British. And since the Muslims, through the Khilafat movement, they were fighting the British, and these pagan neighbors that the Moplas had, they were working as undercover agents of the British and they were undercutting their efforts. So hence they deserve the punishment that they are getting at the hands of the Muslim Moplas. This is the justification that Maulana, what is that? His name, Maulana Hazrat Mohani, is giving in the Muslim League in 1921. That the pagans are working at the behest of the British to undercut the efforts of the Muslims in the Khilafat movement, and hence they deserve to be slaughtered, hence their women deserve to be raped. This is what he is speaking, this is not me. Okay. Here again he makes this statement, okay, presenting the Quran to the Hindus, and if the Hindus become Muslims to save themselves from death, it is a voluntary change of faith and not forcible conversion. This is what, because there were these facts were getting coming out in the open, that the Moplas, they were forcefully converting them. So according to this individual Mohani, if somebody is converting to avoid death, that is voluntary change of faith, that is not forceful. Okay, somebody needs to educate people on the definition of voluntary and forceful. But fine, these all things are in the past, but you'll see similar statements being made in the political and the public discourse to this very day. Instead of condemning, people will look for justifications. People will look to justify crimes. Similar things have been done to justify, the acts of Afzal Guru. Similar acts, similar justifications have been sought, to shield Yaqub Menon. You should know these things. Okay, if you want to talk about politics, let's sit and talk about politics. But midway through the discussion, you cannot get emotional. This is all out there in the public domain. You don't have to take my word for it. Okay. All right. Now, next up is a Sangathan movement. Okay. It took so many years for the pagans to realize that the moderates, and by that extension Congress, is not fighting for their political interests. Okay. It took them so many years. So Congress, it was established in 1885. Okay. And the Sangathan movement, so of the political unity of the pagans that came about in 1905. So it took almost 25 years for the pagans to realize that all these people in the Congress who claim to fight for the pagan interests are indeed fighting for their individual aspirations, their individual political aspirations. And I'm saying there is nothing wrong with this. Okay, there are many national leaders. People will say that how can you say these leaders were only fighting for their political gains? I'm not saying that what they did was bad. Okay, they did things for their own self interest, but don't say that they were freedom fighters. Okay, they were fighting to further their own political positions. They wanted to replace themselves with the British. Sorry, they wanted to replace the British with themselves. Okay, they were not advocating that we'll completely drive them out and and establish a new order. What they were doing is, I want to occupy the position that right now you are occupying, and hence I will uh, do political maneuvers, make political alliances, and then get to the position that you are in, and this is how I will drive you out. Okay, so in 1905, after learning from the partition of Bengal, because partition of Bengal wasn't exactly peaceful, you know you should really look into these things. I mean, these videos that I'm making aren't enough to talk about these things. This is simply just to point you in the right direction. You just really look into what happened post partition of Bengal. Look at the sources. Don't look at the sources that were written by native authors. Look at the sources that were written by British white authors, American authors. Okay, you don't have to take my word for it. So post after what happened in the partition of Bengal in 1905, the pagan natives had learned one lesson, that you cannot count upon the Congress to look out for their political interests, to the very least their safety. Okay, because they had realized the help is not going to come from Congress. So some of the people in the pagan community, they realized that we need a sangathan, and that is where this movement starts, sangathan movement. Okay, later they name it as Hindu Sabha in 1915. Further, it was in 1921, it was named as Akhil Bharat Hindu Mahasabha. Interestingly, it was Savarkar who was a member of this Mahasabha. Okay, so in 1921, it was renamed as Akhil Bharat Hindu Mahasabha. So if indeed Congress and the moderates, uh, you know if indeed the claim of them being the sole spokesperson and the mouthpiece of the pagans and the protector of their rights, if indeed this claim was true, why exactly did this Mahasabha come up? That is something that you should ask. Okay, I'm simply raising questions. And if you want answers to these questions, you'll have to do your own due diligence. Look into the sources. Why exactly was a separate political organization needed at all? If Congress was the national spokesperson. Yep. So now that people had, because they had realized, even the members of the Congress had their conscience shaken after the Mopla genocide. They saw what was going on, and instead of condemning, what was the Muslim leadership doing? Finding justifications. Oh, this is allowed under our laws, under our holy book. These things are okay to be done. That was what was happening, and that this is what the Congress leaders were seeing. Okay. Yep. So, in the backdrop of all of this, Gandhi was supposed to launch civil disobedience movement, meaning that we are not going to follow any laws. We all are, enough English, enough educated in the language of English that disobedience means something that we are not, something that you're not going to obey. Whatever laws that the British, legislate, we are not going to obey those laws, and hence before starting the movement of civil disobedience, let me just clearly tell you, uh, the Muslims, they had completely abandoned Gandhi because they had seen that non-cooperation did not yield very much. Okay, and on top of that, uh, Turkish nationalism had won over, the Islamic sentiments, meaning the natives of Turkey that established democracy, they had not established a caliphate. So it was a sheer embarrassment for the Khilafat leaders back home in Bharat, because the people themselves in Turkey, they do not want Islamic rule, they do not want caliphate rule. Then why exactly are the people or the Muslims from Bharat are advocating caliphate rule in Turkey? So you see clear incongruence. Similar mentality is seen to this very day as well. Countries in West Asia who are supposed to be the place where Islam was born, they themselves are liberalizing and modernizing their democracy. But the people in Bharat, they somehow, want to return to the pristine form of Islam as was practiced by the Prophet. I am not sitting in judgment over here. It is simply an appeal to your sense of reason. If you are, if you are willing to accept the facts that are out there in the public domain, well and good. If not, let's leave it at that. Because let's leave it at that. So yes, Gandhi, he had started preparation for civil disobedience. He had framed up a document that these are the things that we are supposed to do in civil disobedience, will not follow the laws and whatnot. So you understand what civil disobedience means. Okay. Now by this time, the British, they had realized that Gandhi was something. Gandhi is a tricky character. You cannot predict and anticipate what he was going to do. All right. So he framed up this document wherein he had enlisted all the demands all the demands that he wanted fulfilled, and if not, he will launch civil disobedience. As usual, the British did not comply. Okay, they were not going to respond to threats by Gandhi, so they just did not reply, and Gandhi had to inevitably launch civil disobedience movement. But this time, without the support of the Muslims. Why? Because they had seen that non-cooperation yielded big fat nothing. And on top of that, like I mentioned, the Turkish nationalism had overpowered this sentiment of Islam, meaning sentiments of the caliphate. So there was no point, there was no a cause that politically united the Muslims at that time. Okay, because that Khilafat cause had died down. There was no point in fighting for Khilafat when the Turkish people themselves do not want that. Okay, so that had died down. Non-cooperation was a blunder. And now that the same person who led non-cooperation is coming up with civil disobedience, so there was no, I would say, support from the other side, support from the Muslim League. In fact, Jinnah himself had said it long ago that this thing will not work. So credit is to be given to Jinnah. He had said that the means that you are advocating are, they're not right. Okay. Yep, that is what he advocated. So hence, this sentiment had died down. Okay. So Treaty of Peace was signed on 24th of July 1923 by the Allies with Turkey, under which Turkey regained Istanbul and Thrace along with control over the states. There was no further reason for Khilafatists to put their stock in Hindu-Muslim unity or even Swaraj for that matter. Okay, that now that they had, the Treaty of Peace was signed and these places of worship, the Jaziratul Arab, had been returned to Turkey. There was no point in they had no why exactly would they support the non-cooperation movement when their goals were satisfied? So this clearly underlines the fact that it was an alliance of mutual benefit. It was not out of benevolence and empathy that the Muslim League had put their support into the moderates. It was only up until a certain end, and when that end was accomplished, there was no point in them supporting the unity with the pagans and even Swaraj for that matter, because Swaraj for them meant a pagan rule over them, and that is something that sent shivers down their spine. They did not want. And on top of that, this is something that you should know, and on top of that, the year of 1924 was an ultimate disappointment and embarrassment for the Khilafatists. Why? Okay. Not from the British, but from the Turkish nationalists. What did they do? That the people of Turkey themselves, okay, they asked the Caliph, Abdul Majid, okay, they asked him to leave Turkey for Switzerland. So the thing for which the Muslims of Bharat were fighting The people in Turkey deposed that caliph and asked him to leave Turkey. He was like, okay, you're not needed over here, go to Switzerland. What exactly were you supporting? What was the plank on which the entire movement of Khilafat started? So, this was its end. So, all that was for nothing. And on top of that, they come up with justifications for Mopla genocide. That is something that we will cover in detail in the next video. But this was the end of the Khilafat movement, for which there were passionate speeches made in the League assemblies, in the Muslim League assemblies. There were justifications sought out for the slaughtering of pagans, for the rape of pagan women. This was the end. Okay? So, all that was for nothing, I guess. Alright, I guess that's it for this episode of Unlearning the Falsehoods. I'll see you guys in the next video. In the next video, we are going to cover some of the genocides that the pagans have been at the receiving end, but our history textbooks conveniently ignore them because, our government is hell-bent on establishing secular credentials at the expense of pagans. Alright, that's it. Thank you for watching.